Two children vanish without a trace. A mother remarries just days after her husband dies, and buried deep in the Idaho dirt lies a secret no one was supposed to uncover. But the truth, as always, finds a way to rise. This is the story of Lori Vallow Daybell, a suburban mom turned convicted murderer. A woman who once appeared to be a loving mother, churchgoer, and wife. But behind the smile hid a dark obsession with doomsday prophecies, a manipulative partner, and a disturbing belief that her children were no longer alive in spirit. Before it ended in courtrooms and life sentences, it began with missing kids, bizarre deaths, and a twisted tale of faith gone terrifyingly wrong. This is the Lori Vallow Daybell case, and it is unlike anything you've heard before. At the center of this case are two innocent lives, 7-year-old Joshua J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan J.J. was adopted by Lori and her then-husband Charles Vallow. He had autism, but was deeply loving, energetic, and attached to his mother. Tylee was Lori's daughter from a previous relationship. She was a bright, smart, witty teen, fiercely protective of her little brother, and often seen mothering him like a second mom. By all appearances, they were a close-knit family, living in Chandler, Arizona, in early 2019. Friends recalled seeing JJ riding his scooter through the neighborhood. Tylee posted photos with friends, talked about college, and seemed like a typical teen navigating life. But beneath the surface, their world was becoming increasingly dangerous. Lori had long been interested in religion, specifically beliefs tied to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS. But over time, her spiritual curiosity grew into something darker. She began following extreme teachings promoted by a fringe author named Chad Daybell, a man who wrote doomsday novels predicting the end of the world and claimed he could identify who was dark or possessed. Lori became convinced of two things: that the end of the world was near, that her children were no longer themselves. They were zombies whose bodies had been taken over by evil spirits. In February 2019, Lori's mental state and beliefs had changed drastically. Her husband, Charles Vallow, began noticing and documenting her erratic behavior. He told police and family that Lori had said he was a demon and that she was chosen to help lead the 144,000 chosen people into heaven after an apocalypse. He feared for the children's safety. Charles filed for divorce. He tried to get her mental help, but nothing stopped what would come next. On July 11, 2019, Charles Vallow was shot and killed in Chandler, Arizona, by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Alex claimed self-defense. He told police that Charles had come to the house, argued with Lori, and attacked him. But the story raised red flags. Charles was unarmed. The 911 call from Alex was oddly calm. JJ and Tylee were both home at the time. Still no charges were filed. Charles's death was initially ruled self-defense, and Lori moved on, literally. Just a few weeks later, Lori left Arizona and moved to Rexburg, Idaho, taking Tylee and JJ with her. Charles's family, especially JJ's grandparents, were shocked. They hadn't been notified, and Lori had vanished with the children. By September 2019, Lori was living just minutes from Chad Daybell, the doomsday author she had long admired. There was just one problem: Chad was still married to Tammy Daybell, his wife of nearly 30 years. That didn't seem to stop Lori. She and Chad were frequently seen together, sometimes introducing themselves as husband and wife. They were reportedly teaching spiritual classes to small groups and talking about spiritual rankings, labeling people as light or dark, and claiming some were possessed or even already dead inside. And then, one day, the children disappeared. The last time anyone ever saw Tylee Ryan was September 8, 2019, on a trip to Yellowstone National Park with Lori, JJ, and Alex Cox. There's even a family photo taken at the park that day. After that, she was never seen again. JJ was last seen on September 23, 2019, at Kennedy Elementary in Rexburg, Idaho. His special education teacher said he was energetic and cheerful that day. Nothing unusual, but then nothing. Lori unenrolled him from school the very next day. She said she planned to homeschool him, but no one ever saw JJ again after that. And Lori? She was calm, confident, smiling. When police later asked where the kids were, she simply said they were safe, but she refused to say where. Each day that passed deepened the concern. In late November, concerned relatives contacted authorities in Idaho and Arizona. JJ's grandparents, Larry and Kay Woodcock, hadn't heard from him in weeks. They were terrified. On November 26, 2019, Rexburg police performed a welfare check at Lori's home. Her story? Tylee was attending college, but couldn't give the school's name. JJ was with a friend in Arizona, but couldn't give the address. Police quickly discovered she had lied. JJ was not with a friend, and Tylee wasn't enrolled at any college. When they returned to question her again, Lori and Chad had vanished. They fled to Hawaii, leaving behind JJ's toys, medication, backpacks, and no sign of the kids. By December 2019, the case had exploded. Major networks were airing nightly coverage. Missing posters of JJ and Tylee were everywhere. The question gripped the nation. Where are the children? The FBI got involved, so did multiple state agencies. And then the case took another shocking turn. Remember Chad's wife, Tammy? She died on October 19, 2019, just 2 weeks before Chad and Lori left for Hawaii. At the time, her death was considered natural. Chad declined an autopsy and the family held a quiet funeral, but suspicions were growing. Investigators later exhumed Tammy's body and reopened the case. The medical examiner found evidence that pointed to asphyxiation and declared the death suspicious. Just 17 days after Tammy's death, Chad married Lori in Hawaii. No children, no mourning, just a beachside wedding and matching rings purchased weeks earlier. Meanwhile, back on the mainland, the kids were still missing. If you're still watching, thank you. These cases matter, not just for justice, but for truth, awareness, and change. Please consider subscribing to our channel for more real stories just like this one. Every like, comment, and share helps shine light on crimes that must not be forgotten. And most of all, it keeps the victims' names alive. By early 2020, the case had turned from a missing persons report into a nationwide manhunt, not for fugitives, but for answers. The FBI, Rexburg Police, and the Fremont County Sheriff's Office formed a task force. With JJ and Tylee still missing, the suspicion around Lori and Chad grew heavier by the day. Investigators began combing through cell phone records, text messages, financial statements, anything that could place Lori, Chad, or her brother Alex Cox at a potential burial site. Then came the break investigators had been waiting for. Using GPS data from Alex Cox's cell phone, the FBI traced his movements on September 9, 2019, the day after Tylee was last seen alive. His phone pinged several times in the backyard of Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. The exact location, near the pet cemetery. That detail stuck. Investigators knew they had something, but they needed more. As the investigation intensified, Lori and Chad were still relaxing in Kauai, Hawaii, acting like newlyweds while the world begged for answers about her children. On February 20, 2020, Lori Vallow was finally arrested and charged with 2 felony counts of desertion and non-support of dependent children, obstruction of justice, criminal solicitation to commit a crime, contempt of court. Still, when asked where her children were, Lori said nothing. She smiled for her mugshot, walked into court in full makeup, smirked as the charges were read. Her behavior chilled everyone. Prosecutors asked for $5 million bail. She refused to cooperate. The judge lowered it slightly, but Lori remained in jail while investigators prepared for a major search. The world still didn't know what happened to JJ and Tylee, but that was about to change. Just after sunrise on June 9, 2020, FBI agents, local police, and cadaver dogs descended upon Chad Daybell's property in Salem, Idaho. Warrant in hand, They began digging near the pet cemetery where Alex Cox's phone had last pinged. They didn't have to dig deep. Within hours, agents uncovered human remains, carefully wrapped and buried. First, they found charred bone fragments and flesh, later confirmed to be Tylee Ryan. Her body had been dismembered and burned, likely to prevent identification. Nearby, they uncovered a shallow grave containing J.J. Vallow, still in his red pajamas. His arms were bound with duct tape, and he had been wrapped in plastic. Autopsy reports later revealed he had suffocated. The bodies were confirmed just days later using dental records and DNA. The community mourned. Vigils were held, balloons released, flowers laid. The nation grieved for 2 young lives, stolen and hidden like trash in the backyard of their mother's new husband. And Lori, she said nothing. As soon as the remains were found, Chad Daybell was arrested while sitting in his car across the street, watching the search unfold. He was charged with 2 felony counts of destruction, alteration, and concealment of evidence, and later upgraded to first-degree murder. His calm demeanor during the search turned to panic when police pulled him from the vehicle. His mugshot revealed a man no longer in control. But the damage was done. Investigators soon uncovered one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in the case, Lori and Chad's zombie list. This was a spreadsheet that ranked people by light or dark spirits. It assigned numbers to friends and family members. Some were labeled as zombies or possessed, others marked for removal. On this list, Tylee Ryan, labeled dark, J.J. Vallow, dark and gone. Lori had told her friends in the weeks before the murders that J.J. had become a zombie and he wouldn't live long. Even more chilling, Melanie Gibb, a close friend of Lori's, testified that Lori believed J.J. had died and a demon had taken his place. She said Lori and Chad would pray to cast out spirits and decide whether someone was too dark to survive. This wasn't just bizarre behavior, it was a belief system used to justify murder. On May 25, 2021, a grand jury indicted both Lori and Chad on multiple counts, including first-degree murder of J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan conspiracy to commit murder, grand theft destruction, and concealment of remains. But another charge shocked even seasoned legal analysts. Both were also indicted for the murder of Tammy Daybell, Chad's wife. Her death, once believed to be from natural causes, was now labeled a homicide by asphyxiation. The evidence was staggering. Text messages, location pings, spiritual death rankings, false alibis, and the physical remains of the children on Chad's own land. The Doomsday Mom and her prophet husband were finally facing justice. But before the trials could begin, Lori's mental competency became a legal issue. In June 2021, a judge ruled that Lori was mentally unfit to stand trial and ordered her to undergo psychiatric treatment. She was placed in a secure mental facility for nearly a year. Experts debated her state of mind. Was she delusional or calculating? Meanwhile, Chad remained behind bars, awaiting his own trial. In April 2022, Lori was declared competent, and the trial clock began ticking. The families of J.J. and Tylee, especially grandparents Larry and Kay Woodcock, begged for justice. They had waited too long. They had fought so hard. It was finally time to face the truth in court. As Lori walked into the Idaho courtroom in 2023, she was no longer the glowing, smiling mother from her wedding photos. She was a woman accused of murdering her children for love, for power, for belief. No one knew for sure. But the evidence was ready. The witnesses were prepared. The jurors were waiting, and the world watching. After nearly 4 years of speculation, media frenzy, and unimaginable grief, the case that haunted America finally made its way to court. In April 2023, Lori Vallow Daybell stood trial in Boise, Idaho for the murders of her 2 children, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, and the killing of Tammy Daybell, her husband, Chad's former wife. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, family members, survivors, strangers who had followed every twisted chapter of the case. The eyes of the nation were fixed on a woman who now sat in a beige jacket, expressionless, hands folded in her lap. No cameras were allowed inside, but transcripts revealed every gasp, every tear, and every chilling piece of evidence. From day one, prosecutors painted a clear and harrowing narrative. Lori didn't just want a new life with Chad. She wanted her old life erased. The prosecution described her belief system not as a religion, but as a tool for murder. Lori and Chad had dehumanized JJ, Tylee, and Tammy, labeling them as dark spirits, or zombies, removing the guilt from their actions. They walked the jury through cell phone GPS, placing Alex Cox at the burial site on the exact days the children disappeared. Text messages between Lori and Chad the morning after Tylee's murder, with Chad joking, "Gonna burn debris today in the fire pit." Alex Cox's phone pinging near where JJ's remains were buried the morning he was killed. Lori's chilling calmness after each death, including immediately ordering wedding rings just days after Tammy's sudden passing. The evidence was physical, it was digital, it was spiritual, but most of all, it was undeniable. JJ's autopsy showed he was suffocated with duct tape, his hands and feet bound. Tylee's remains were so badly burned, a full autopsy was impossible. Only a jawbone and small pieces of tissue were found. Tammy Daybell's exhumed body showed signs of asphyxiation, not natural causes. But perhaps the most heartbreaking was the 911 call from Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandfather, when he first reported them missing. "We don't know where our grandson is. We don't know if he's safe. Please, please help us." The jury listened to it all. And so did Lori. She showed little emotion, even when graphic images of her children's remains were displayed in court. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Melanie Gibb, Lori's former best friend, testified that Lori told her, "JJ is a zombie, his spirit is gone." Colby Ryan, Lori's surviving son, confronted his mother in a recorded phone call after JJ and Tylee's bodies were found. "You murdered my siblings. You did this, Mom." Lori responded with, "I know it seems that way, but there's a reason for all of it." Her tone remained eerily calm. FBI agents explained how Alex Cox appeared to act as a spiritual hitman, believing he was doing God's work by eliminating the dark spirits from Lori's life. Each testimony chipped away at Lori's already fragile defense. Lori's legal team didn't deny that JJ and Tylee were dead. They didn't deny the GPS data or the spiritual language used by Lori and Chad. Instead, they attempted to distance Lori from the actual crimes, shifting the blame onto Alex Cox and Chad Daybell. They claimed Lori was manipulated by Chad. Chad was the mastermind behind the murders. Lori was a victim of apocalyptic delusion, not a killer. But jurors weren't convinced, especially after prosecutors played recordings of Lori and Chad giggling about sealing each other in eternal spiritual marriages, while the children were already missing. One phone call from jail had Lori whispering to Chad, "We'll be together forever. The world doesn't understand us." The final day of the trial arrived. Prosecutors looked the jury in the eyes and said, "You don't need to understand why a mother would do this. You just need to see that she did." They reminded the jury of the evidence, the deception, and the utter disregard for human life. Lori's defense rested on silence. She chose not to testify. Not once during the trial did she apologize. Not once did she offer an explanation. After 6 weeks of gut-wrenching testimony and 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. In a silent courtroom, the foreman stood. Guilty on all counts: murder of J.J. Vallow, murder of Tylee Ryan, conspiracy to commit murder, murder of Tammy Daybell, fraud, theft, and destruction of evidence. Lori blinked. She didn't cry, she didn't flinch. But outside the courthouse, Kay and Larry Woodcock wept, not just for justice, but for their precious grandson, taken far too soon. Lori Vallow was now a convicted triple murderer, a once devoted mother turned Doomsday Mom. The nation exhaled. The trial was over, but questions still lingered. Would Chad Daybell face the same fate? Was this really about religion, or something far more sinister, Could anyone who loved Lori ever have seen this coming? While Lori Vallow sat convicted, the other half of this dark alliance was still awaiting his day in court. Chad Daybell, the self-proclaimed visionary and apocalyptic prophet, was no longer seen as a peaceful author or widowed husband. He was now facing murder charges for the deaths of Tylee Ryan, J.J. Vallow, and his own wife, Tammy Daybell. And with Lori now officially guilty, the pressure on Chad was at an all-time high. Prosecutors were ready, investigators had mountains of evidence, and public sentiment was overwhelmingly clear. Chad Daybell was not Lori's follower, he was her leader. Born in Utah in 1968, Chad Guy Daybell was a former cemetery sexton, LDS member, and religious fiction author. His books combined near-death experiences with doomsday prophecy, and over time, his beliefs took a radical turn. He founded a small publishing company and began preaching to small online groups about spiritual portals, light and dark ratings, and the coming end times. He believed the world would end in July 2020, and only a chosen few, the 144,000, would be saved. Chad claimed he could discern spirits and identify zombies, people who had been possessed and were no longer human. For Lori, this wasn't just attractive, it was divine confirmation. They were both married when they met, but within months, both of their spouses would be dead. And according to police, it was no coincidence. Let's go back for a moment to October 19th, 2019. Just 17 days before Chad and Lori flew to Hawaii, his wife, Tammy Daybell, a healthy 49-year-old librarian and mother of 5, died in her sleep. Chad told authorities she had a coughing fit and simply passed away. No autopsy was performed at the time. The death certificate listed natural causes, but none of Tammy's family believed that. Her children said she was happy, healthy, and training for a race. Co-workers said she was upbeat, and most of all, she had no known medical conditions. After J.J. and Tylee were found buried in Chad's backyard in June 2020, investigators exhumed Tammy's body. The results were shocking. Tammy had died of asphyxiation, not illness. That meant every single person close to Chad who had stood in the way of his spiritual mission had mysteriously died. In May 2021, Chad Daybell was officially indicted on 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 2 counts of insurance fraud, tampering with evidence. He faced the death penalty if convicted. His trial was delayed several times, first for pandemic-related reasons, then for mental competency evaluations, and finally to separate it from Lori's trial to ensure fairness. But by mid-2025, with Lori convicted and sentenced, the final spotlight turned back to Chad. Chad's defense team began laying the groundwork for a claim that many found infuriating. Chad didn't kill anyone, Lori did. They positioned Chad as a manipulated, love-struck husband who had fallen under Lori's powerful spell. According to them, Chad's bizarre religious views were just spiritual fiction, not an excuse for murder. But prosecutors weren't buying it. They said Chad was not just involved. He masterminded the entire plan. He lied to police repeatedly about the children's whereabouts. He encouraged Lori to label J.J. and Tylee as dark spirits. He buried their bodies in his backyard. He married Lori just days after Tammy's death, and he collected thousands in life insurance after Tammy's murder. One prosecutor told the press this wasn't a love story, it was a murder story built on lies, greed, and delusion. As Chad awaited trial, experts and former followers began to speak out. They described his group, sometimes called Preparing a People, as a doomsday cult where Chad's word was law. He claimed to have lived multiple past lives. He said certain people were translated beings, immune to death. He labeled people around him by their light or dark scores on a spiritual scale, and once someone was deemed dark, they could be eliminated. Freed, as Chad put it. This doctrine wasn't abstract, it was deadly. In the lead-up to trial, victims' families began preparing impact statements. They described the nightmares they still have, the birthdays they no longer celebrate, The photos they refused to take off the wall, even though they hurt to look at. Kay and Larry Woodcock, JJ's grandparents, said, "This was not God's plan. This was Chad and Lori's plan." Tylee's friends created memorial scholarships in her name. Her siblings wrote letters they'll never get to send. Her brother Colby has said he still has panic attacks at night. And Tammy's family, they're still stunned. "We trusted Chad. We had dinner with him. He killed our sister," one brother said. As of mid-2025, Chad Daybell's trial is expected to begin in late 2025 or early 2026. He remains behind bars in Fremont County Jail, held without bail. And this time, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty, citing the calculated nature of the crimes multiple victims use of deception and spiritual abuse, the ongoing trauma inflicted on surviving family members. The court has already warned that Chad's trial could take months. But for the families, it's not about speed. "We've waited this long," said Tylee's aunt. "We'll wait longer, as long as it takes for justice." In July 2023, Lori Vallow Daybell was found guilty on all counts in a highly emotional trial. First-degree murder of her children, JJ Vallow, and Tylee Ryan conspiracy to commit murder, grand theft related to Social Security benefits collected after their deaths. After weeks of heartbreaking testimony and graphic forensic evidence, the jury deliberated for just 7 hours before returning a unanimous verdict. During the sentencing phase, victims' family members were allowed to address Lori directly. Their words were searing. "You are not a mother. A mother does not do this," said Colby Ryan, Lori's surviving son. "You killed my siblings. You killed the light in our family. You were meant to protect them, not destroy them," said Kay Woodcock, JJ's grandmother. And Lori? She never apologized. She never showed emotion. Instead, she rambled about the afterlife, insisted JJ and Tylee were happy now, and claimed to be a mother of eternal beings. It was chilling. On July 31st, 2023, the judge sentenced Lori Vallow Daybell to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in tears, kicked not joy, not triumph, but release. Lori is now serving her sentence in an Idaho women's prison under maximum security. She is reportedly kept under close watch due to the high-profile nature of her case. Multiple reports say she still talks about her visions, still believes the apocalypse is coming, still sees herself as a chosen one, but in prison there are no cults, no followers, just steel doors, cold food, and the echo of a family that will never forgive her. Her surviving son, Colby, has said he no longer considers her his mother. "The woman who gave birth to me died with Tylee and JJ. I don't know who this person is." As for Chad Daybell, he remains in jail awaiting his trial, now scheduled for early 2026. Prosecutors have confirmed they will seek the death penalty. Chad's defense team continues to argue that Lori manipulated him, that he was seduced into a fantasy. But the evidence, the shallow graves, the text messages, the life insurance policies, the spiritual scoring system, paints a chilling portrait. And with Lori convicted, the public is more convinced than ever that Chad was the architect of it all. JJ Vallow was only 7 years old when he died. He was sweet, neurodiverse, and full of joy. He loved hugs, iPads, school buses, and his grandparents. He had an infectious laugh that echoed through every room he entered. Tylee Ryan was just 16, a teenager, yes, but one forced to grow up too fast. She'd already lost her father, was raising her little brother, and trying to protect him. She had dreams, she had courage, and she died fighting back. As we close this heartbreaking story, we're left with questions that may never fully be answered. How did so many people miss the signs? How can religious belief be so tragically twisted? And how do you move on from a crime this devastating? We may never know, but what we can do is honor the victims, not just with tears, but with truth. So today, remember Tylee Ryan, remember JJ Vallow, remember Tammy Daybell, and ask yourself, what would you have seen? What would you have done? Thank you for being here. If this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Comment below. Do you believe Chad Daybell should receive the death penalty? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and keep seeking justice for those who no longer have a voice.